Hello and welcome to the Alchemy Laboratory. This is going to be a series of videos where I plan on discussing, alchemy experiments that I'm currently working on, maybe material that I've accessed or come across in one way or the other, and maybe run through some experiments eventually. But today, I'm going to do a short one. We're going to be discussing two books. One that I recently acquired, and another one that I've had for quite some time. And here in the background, we'll just have a couple of experiments that I'm currently working on. For backdrop, but also we'll be discussing them briefly. Um, the first book here that we have is a book titled "Real Alchemy: A Primer of Practical Alchemy" by Robert Allen Barley. Now, this is the most recent book that I've acquired about alchemy. Um, it's actually the first alchemy book that I've ever purchased in physical form. All my other alchemy books and texts are all digital, mostly for convenience, but I want to start acquiring a small library of physical books, so I figured I'd start with this one since it had really good reviews. And I'm not going to open it, because I don't want to mess with copyright and all that good stuff. So we're just gonna, I'll do an overview and my thoughts about it, and then we'll move on to the next book. And after we're done doing that, we'll move on to those right there. So let me adjust the camera. So this book here, it's a fairly good book. I would say if you wanted to rate it, it'd be up there with beginner alchemy. Maybe a few portions of it might be more directed towards intermediate. There's not really anything in there that I would consider advanced per se, but there's books for that. We're gonna talk about the negatives of this book first, and that way we can end on a good note, by doing the positives afterwards. Now, one thing of note is that the first 40 pages of this book, 39 if I'm not mistaken, are just a basic introduction. The first little bit is about the author, his history with alchemy, how he became a professor of alchemy, and all that good stuff. It was fairly interesting. I mean, I will admit I did enjoy that. Then we have the history of alchemy, a brief history of alchemy, astrology, stuff like that, and that takes up almost a quarter of the book before we actually get into practical alchemy, which the title of the book says, "A Primer of Practical Alchemy." So, for a good fourth of the book to be an introduction, take that as you will. Okay, and then we have processes. It's fairly brief, but it does discuss about the basic processes. Not all of them, but a good amount, and then it explains and all that. So that's good. And then it talks about the vegetable kingdom. Now, the portion of the vegetable kingdom in this book is very brief. I don't know why, but it was. I wasn't a fan of that. I would have liked a little bit more about the vegetable kingdom, since that is, the one that most people kind of, tend to steer towards. But, just saying that. And here's the part that kind of, I'm not going to say surprised, but I found this very interesting, is that almost half of the book is about minerals and about metals. Now, I was thinking about that, and my assumption and my guess is that the author was probably his specialty, or something he knew quite a bit about. I believe somewhere in there he mentions that he is a chemist, so maybe he focuses on that. So that might be the reason for that, but I'm not really not gonna say not interested, but I don't really do a lot of experiments or processes with minerals or metals, so that part of the book doesn't really interest me, I guess is one way to put it. But it is what it is. If you're into that, it is good that it's there. But so let's move on to the positives. You know, I did just say quite a bit of negatives, and it might seem like I didn't like this book, but overall, I did thoroughly enjoy this book. I mean, it's a good reference, in case you need a refresher on the processes or anything of that nature. That's always there in physical form, which I do appreciate. And so, and it's a good book for beginners. I mean, I wish I would have had this book, 17 years ago when I first got into alchemy. I jumped in on the deep end, reading ancient text, old text, the real chain of Homer, some treatises, some Rosicrucian texts. So, and when you go from not knowing anything about alchemy whatsoever to reading those types of texts, it's a bit confusing, and it's a bit advanced. So, as an intermediate alchemist, I'm not going to be pretentious and say, I'm a master or an adept or anything like that. Even after 17 years of practicing alchemy, I think I would have loved to have had this book back in the day. And if anybody told me that they were interested in getting into alchemy, I would definitely let them borrow this book. So for those reasons, even though for an intermediate or even a more advanced alchemist, there's not going to be anything in here that you probably don't already know. I'm going to give this book an 8 out of 10, just because it is a great book overall. The next book that we're going to discuss here briefly is Rosemary Gladstart's Medicinal Herbs, A Beginner's Guide. Now, this is a book that a lot of people are probably familiar with. So, I mean, it is a very popular book in herbalism. It's not an alchemy book per se, but it does discuss tinctures, infusions, decoctions. So it is good for alchemists, in my opinion. So we'll get to that in a second. Let me readjust the camera one time. Now, this book here, I got this, I'd say about 6 months to a year ago. Although I've been wanting to get it for a few years now. I didn't get it until recently. I saw it at a local store where they sell animal feed and things like that, and it'd been in my wish list on eBay for a few years, so I figured, hey, why not? I think I paid like $15 for it, so I thought it was a good deal, so I got it. I like this book a lot. It's well, let's talk about the negatives, and then we'll do again like we did the other book, and do the positives. That way, again, we can end on a good note, so we're not a downer over here. So the negatives is, again, just like the other one, it's basic. It's a beginner's guide. It says so in the title, and so there's not really anything that might be considered advanced. And it's not an alchemy book. It's an herbalism book. It's medicinal herbs. And that's really all the negatives I have to say about it. It's a great book. It has it talks about basic herbs that most people are familiar with: garlic, oregano, turmeric, and a few others, and nettle, I believe, as well. And one of the things I do enjoy about that is that in its simplicity, it gives a lot of information, because a lot of people that are barely getting into alchemy or herbalism, you know, some plants are very dangerous, and you have to be very careful about dosages. You have to be very careful about what part of the plant that you ingest or use, and they can be very toxic, and have very bad long-term effects or even short-term effects. You could poison yourself if you don't know what you're doing. Whereas the plants that are discussed in this book, these are plants that you'd have to eat a garbage can full of them to, do yourself any damage. And even then, you'd probably, get sick to your stomach from eating so many herbs. Like garlic, for instance, is one of the ones that's discussed in here. It's discussed as an antiviral, antibacterial, and all kinds of other things. And I mean, we eat garlic. Most people eat garlic on a regular basis. You're not going to overdose or hurt yourself by ingesting garlic, oregano, bay leaves, nettle, things like that. So I do enjoy that. You know, as an alchemist and as somebody who would even call themselves an herbalist to a point. It's a very good book. Now this one, and it's a beautiful book with a lot of pictures. It has some recipes in there, some of Gladstar's personal recipes. I'm gonna give this book a 9 out of 10. It's a very good book, and I would highly recommend it to anybody wanting to get into alchemy, wanting to get into herbalism, or if somebody who just wants to begin to try to add more medicinal herbs to their daily life. It's a very good book, highly recommended, and it's definitely going to remain in my personal library for years to come. Now we're going to just look at some, excuse the focus. Okay. We're going to look at some current experiments and a couple of new things that I've gotten. Well, one of them is not that new, but it's something that it's going to be part of an experiment that I plan on starting soon, so in that case it is kind of new. Here we have some dandelion root. Excuse the lighting, it's terrible, I know, but I'm sure you just use your imagination. These are some dandelion roots that I've been collecting for the past few months, drying and processing. I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet, but I did enjoy the process of harvesting this material. Very relaxing, and allows you to get out in nature, practice on identification of plants, and drying of your material, and all of that good stuff. I don't plan on extracting the salt out of this, simply because I don't have enough material. And so this is probably something that I'll just keep for the meantime until I can think of a use for it. But alchemy is about learning. Alchemy is about knowledge, and the knowledge and experience that I've gained from the harvesting of this material was definitely worth it. And the product is just a bonus. It's just it's a physical representation of the knowledge gained and the knowledge acquired, the wisdom acquired, and the experiences in the process of harvesting it. So this is probably one of my favorite jars for that reason alone. I see it as, if you could get the knowledge out of my brain and put it into a jar, this is what it would look like, when it comes to harvesting of plants. We're going to skip this one for now and move on to this one. This here, the label, salt of chamomile. These are some salts that I extracted from some chamomile. This is the most recent, well, not the most recent, but it's one of the most recent experiments that I've conducted. And this material here, that began as approximately 4 ounces of dried chamomile flowers, and I went through the process of calcination, dissolution, and then recrystallization. and this is how much I ended up with. Here's my hand on the side as comparison. It's probably about a quarter inch of material there at the bottom, and you probably can't see too well with the current lighting that I'm working with, but there's still a lot of impurities in that material, so I will probably have to dissolve them again and recrystallize the salt. This again, I enjoy the extraction of salt from plant material quite a bit. It teaches patience. It gives you time outside while doing your alchemy experiments. This is not something that you can do inside of a building because of all the smoke involved, the intensity of the flames required for these processes, and so it allows you to go outside, quiet contemplation as you do your process, and for that reason that is my favorite experiment, is the extraction of salts. So let's put that up. We'll talk about why I have these salts here momentarily. I'll do these together. Now what you see here on the right, that is alcohol that I extracted from chamomile flowers and from nettle leaves. Now this was done by making an infusion, a cold infusion to be specific, of chamomile flowers and nettle leaves, and then I added some sugar and a small amount of yeast to make it's alcohol, so you might say it's almost hooch, you know. This is the way that I do it. I believe the proper methodology for doing this is to use fresh material and to allow the natural sugars and natural yeasts within the plant to do this fermentation more naturally without having to add external components like yeast and sugar in this case. But this is an experiment that I was wanting to do, so I did that just for the sake of time. After the fermentation was complete and the fermentation process had stopped, I froze the material. Now the reason I did this was alcohol has a lower freezing temperature than water, so by freezing it for a certain period of time, some of your water will freeze and your alcohol won't, and you'll end up concentrating the material. Now to what level this concentrates it, you would need a device to measure that if you wanted, ABV or whatever you want to call it, but it is certainly concentrated. This was almost a full jar, and this is the material that I had left, so it is definitely concentrated. What we have here is a tincture that I'm working on. This is one that I completed a couple of years ago. I'll put that right there just as a backdrop. This here, you probably can't see it. It's getting kind of dark out, unfortunately. Let me turn this light on. Maybe that'll help. It helps a little bit, I suppose, but there's a bit of a glare. We just have to accept it, I suppose. This is an alcohol extraction that I'm working on. I'm using 140 proof. It's 100 proof vodka, because that's cheap and easy to get a hold of. You could use Everclear if you wanted a cleaner product, and then water that down with distilled water. I didn't have that on hand, and this is just a quick experiment, so that's what I had on hand. It's generally my go-to just because of price restrictions. Vodka's cheap, Everclear is expensive. It's available here in Texas. It might not be available in your state, but if you can get a hold of it, it's definitely worth the money if you want to do tinctures, in my opinion. It doesn't have a smell to it like vodka does, and the taste is cleaner from what I've heard. I don't drink, so I wouldn't know, but it smells better. That's just something that I'm working on. I've done dozens of tinctures in my years in studying alchemy, so this is nothing. I'm not really learning anything from this, but you know, it's, you got to keep your skills sharp, so repetition is always good. And so in this book, Practical Alchemy by Bartlett, one of the things that I forgot to mention was there was a gem in there that I found, and that is, he explains a simple process by which to make one of the lesser stones, a vegetable stone. And in a book that's so beginner friendly, I found that to be kind of strange, because this is a very complex process that can take months and months and months of work, and it's something that I want to try. And so this material this is the reason that I made this alcohol and I'm in the process of making this tincture, because those are the three components that are required for the making of the stone: is the salts, the alcohol, and the tincture. So that's why I made those. Although I do think that I'm probably going to redo the alcohol, and maybe try to do it without the addition of the external components, for the sake of purity of the final material. I would hate to work for months on a product that I'm not 100% satisfied with, and I would not be 100% satisfied with using of that alcohol material. Who knows, I might have to acquire it from somebody who has a distillation system, because I don't, and maybe that way we will end up with a cleaner product and a cleaner end result. I do have what was gonna say, I'm sorry. I do have essential oils that I have acquired. I didn't extract those myself. I did purchase those, and so I'll be using those. Now the last thing on here is beef tallow. I did extract this myself. Sorry if it looks kind of gross, but you know, it's not that bad. This is something that I extracted myself, as you can see here, last year. And yeah, so almost a year now, a little bit over a year actually, as of the recording of this video. I did have some bones that I had also extracted and collected and dehydrated, but those were destroyed in an experiment that I did recently that I did not film, unfortunately. I was trying to make them into bone meal so that I could calcinate them, but something went awry. I'm not sure what I did wrong, and they were destroyed, so they were no longer of use. Luckily, you know, we eat a lot of chicken around here, so I will be able to get some more bones fairly soon, and I will try that experiment again. So and I don't know what I'm going to do with these yet. I have quite a bit of material here, so I could do different experiments. I've been doing a plant alchemy within the vegetable kingdom for years and years now, but I've never really dabbled into alchemy within the animal kingdom, and this is something that I would like to start doing experiments on, because there's not really a lot of information out there regarding it. And what is alchemy if not knowledge, if not the quest for knowledge and the quest for understanding of the material around us? And so, you know, I will definitely be recording these experiments in a later Alchemy Laboratory episode, beginning with the tallow itself. I'll probably be breaking this up into several portions for different experiments. Maybe try to extract some alcohol from it, or maybe try to calcinate some of it, dissolve some in white vinegar, and just see what the results are. See what happens, see what the end result is, and see if any of it is usable for further experimentation and further use, in the quest for the great work. Because it's my belief that the Alchemist Stone, the Philosopher's Stone of Will, if you will not come from plants. It will not come from minerals. It will not come from the animal kingdom. I believe if the Philosopher's Stone truly is a physical material, if it really is a physical product and not just a philosophical one, and it is the ultimate work of all alchemy, then it has to come from all three kingdoms. Again, this is my opinion, but to me it makes perfect sense that it would have to come from all three kingdoms and from the internal self. It has to be an amalgamation of all the kingdoms, not just one, not just two, not just three, all of them. So anyways, I've rambled long enough, and I'm running out of memory here for recording, so I guess I'll go ahead and cut this episode as done and move on to the next. As always, thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more episodes in the Alchemy Laboratory. I will be releasing these regularly if I could, when I have the time, of course. And we'll be discussing different things. So, thank you for watching.